list?
I think that Commissioner Howell has not yet joined,
Okay.
but you still have 7, so you're welcome to start if you wish.
Okay, and Sadie's here, right, Commissioner?
Yes, correct, Commissioner Davis.
Okay. All right, sounds good. Thank you. All right, well, welcome everybody. It's good to see you. And as you know, we're in a bit of a transition with the soon to be inaugurated governor-elect as the next governor. And I'll be saying a little bit more about the transition that we're in a little bit later. Just let me do a quick review of the agenda. After we do committee updates, we have several informational items, one from Finance and Administration having to do with the Community College Construction Grant Program, and then we have 3 Stage 1 applications from institutions, which Dr. Dow and Ms. Gordon McCown will be explaining all of that to us. And again, those are all informational. We'll have a chance to ask questions if we want to, but there's no action that's needed. And then the only thing that needs an action today is the performance accountability report, and we will need to approve that. And then, as you know, I will request we move into closed session at the end of this meeting to discuss a personnel issue, but I'll say more about that later. So before I ask Dr. Fielder, who's joining us and will be making some comments under the public comment part of the agenda, I just want to thank Dr. Fielder for his leadership. I know I speak on behalf of all the commissioners that we have been, not only we, but the state of Maryland has greatly benefited from his leadership. And we have all benefited as commissioners to have his knowledge and expertise the whole time that that we've been working with him, and to guide us in the work that we do. And his perspective has always been valuable, and there's no question that we're all going to miss him. So with that, Dr. Fielder, I would like this to make a few comments.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the introduction. I really do. And what I wanted to do this afternoon was just basically straightforward and say thank you to each one of our commissioners and all of you collectively. What you've accomplished in this last 7 years has been phenomenal. It really has been an honor of a lifetime to work with each of you as kind of a capstone to all my higher ed background, knowing that Lieutenant Governor Rutherford and Governor Hogan and I, the 3 of us were cabinet members for Governor Ehrlich. So our relationship goes back 20 years. It's been phenomenal to work with both of these gentlemen, and I do mean that literally. They stayed focused on where we needed to be in strategy and worked through some things, not really disrupted by all the things that happen unexpectedly. But for me, it's been such a clear and evident thing to watch this commission work and build together, knowing how rare it is in life for each of us or all of us collectively to be able to help people anonymously. And that is so key for what Impact does. Our work through regulatory change, through OSRA, through finance, through all of the different areas has been phenomenally successful at increasing student success and increasing student access. The embracement of diversity is reflected in everything that the Commission has been doing to treat all those equal. No matter how great a stature or how less of a stature, we have been able to do fair and equitable treatment. So I wanted just to spend a few minutes with you just now to say thank you. I really just have appreciated all the things I've learned and the different perspectives. It's so important to know that I was able to have a call with a full staff before my resignation of a week ago. That is part of the gubernatorial transition protocol. surprised, but at the same time, that's part of what we do. So I just wanted to say thank you. I'm going to drop off, Madam Chair, and I just want to say thank you. Bye-bye now.
Well, Dr. Fielder, we're all very, very appreciative, and I know we'll stay in touch. So I'm certain I'll be talking to you soon.
Yes, Debbie does have my home address. Not that you want to come bang on my door, but also phone number and email. Thank you all.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And the commissioners have your email address also. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
First thing we need to do is to approve our minutes from December 14th. So if I could have a motion.
I move.
Thanks, Commissioner Serrano. Move the motion. A second, please.
Second.
Thank you. Any edits, additions, corrections, anything? All right, I don't see any hands going up and I don't hear any voices. So all in favor, please say aye or raise your hand, whichever. Aye. Anyone opposed? And anybody abstaining? All right, so the minutes pass. So let's turn to committee updates. And Commissioner Boyd, I don't know if you are in a position yet to do your committee report. Do you want me to do you last?
No, I can do it now. It's the
Okay.
Educational Policy Group. And none of the issues that we normally address have been referred to the Educational Policy Committee. So that is our status at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions for Commissioner Boyd? Okay, and Commissioner Coleman, outreach grants and financial assistance. I think you're muted.
You're muted.
I'm sorry. No, we do not have a report at this time. We were going to meet, and then after we heard the news about Dr. Fielder, we changed our mind. So we will meet next month.
All right, great. Thank you, Commissioner Coleman. And even though there's no report, anybody have any questions? Okay, and Mr. Newman, Finance and Operations Committee, I know you've got your agenda item coming up, but anything else that we need to know about? Is Mr. Newman with us?
Good afternoon, everyone. We are continuing to fill vacancies in the agency. I am pleased to report that we have filled all the positions in the new academic program review unit. So that, I think, is something to consider an accomplishment through the work of Trish Gordon-McCown, Dr. Emily Dow, and Lindsay Bates. Also, we're awaiting the release of the fiscal 2024 budget, which should be happening within the next week. And then to anticipate and begin preparing for our budget hearings in the General Assembly.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Newman?
Yeah.
Okay, and Commissioner McDaniels is not able to be with us today, but Dr. Schmertz, I think you're going to represent him. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, anything from that committee?
Wow. No, there is nothing to report at this time. The last time that the committee gathered was for the event in early December, and we have yet to reconvene.
Right. Okay, and I think in our last meeting, we talked about perhaps scheduling a fuller report from DEI to hear about the mission statement and some other things that you've been working on. So we'll just need to make certain to get that on the agenda.
Yes, I can work with the committee on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Schmertz? All right. So, Mr. Newman, I think we are ready for your report on the Community College Construction Grant Program.
Okay, this is an annual report that we do regarding the state and local cost sharing formula for the community college construction grant program. And Dan Schuster is the expert in capital funding here at the commission. So I'll hand it over to Dan to present this item.
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the commission. As Jeff indicated, this is an informational item that we present every year around this time. And the reason why we're presenting it now is because the community colleges are going to be sending to us their budget request for FY25 by July 1st. And in the meantime, part of what they have to do in that request is submit the information to show us they do have the local commitment for the local match. So between now and then, they had to be talking to their counties about providing that portion of the funds. And so they need to know how much they need to ask for it. So we have to tell them what the state share is. Just a reminder in general of how the Community College Construction Grant Program works. That's the vehicle through which state aid is provided for capital projects at the community college for construction, as well as capital improvements and renovations on their campuses. And the way that the program works is anytime a college is proposing a project, they have to send in what's called a facility program for review. MEC, and DGS, and DBM all look at that to see that the project is justified, to see what it entails, and see whether all of those items are eligible under this program. And then the determination is made as to whether all or part of that project is eligible. And then whatever the eligible portion is, the state is going to be paying a certain percentage of that, with the difference being the local match that is paid for by the college or the sponsoring county or some combination thereof. And the state percentage is set in statute. Actually, it's in the education article. And the way it works is there's something called the foundation program, the MSDE, the Department of Education calculates to figure out what is the adequate funding for K through 12 schools in each jurisdiction. And that foundation program also has a local match and a state match associated with it. The local match is calculated based on enrollments and wealth factors in the jurisdiction. So the wealth factors are things like income levels and property assessment values and things of that nature. And so for each jurisdiction, whatever the percentage of the state share is of that foundation program, that's also the percentage that the state is going to pay for these capital projects at community colleges, with a couple of exceptions. And those are, one thing is for this program, for the community college program, the state percentage has to be between 50 and 70%. And so if the MSD calculation is lower than 50, we adjust those upward to 50%. If it's above 70, we adjust it down to 70%. And the other difference is there's 3 community colleges that are regional colleges. That means they're sponsored by more than one county. And those are the College of Southern Maryland, Warwick Community College, as well as Chesapeake College. And those colleges all get 75% state match for this program. So if you are looking at your commission book, if you go to page 7, I believe it is, you'll see what the rates are for the 15 schools in FY25. A couple of notes on there that, first of all, that you'll see only 15 schools. That's because Baltimore City Community College does not participate in this program. They're a state agency, and so the state will pay for 100% of the capital costs for their projects. These percentages are for the FY projects to begin in FY25. The numbers will change from year to year. They might go up 1% or 2, up or down, but they generally stay about the same. And the way that it works is if the project is receiving its initial funding in FY25, these rates will carry through the remainder of that project, even if it gets funding in future years. And there's different rates associated with those years. This rate will be what carries through the life of that project. And that's all I really had to discuss on this, unless there's any questions from anyone.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schuster. Any questions about this report? Commissioner Serrano?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. On the overall budget request for this program, I'm not sure I'm looking at the right document, but I see from 2021 it was 87 million. And then I see the 2023 request to be 67 million. Is that correct?
I'd have to look exactly. Those sound like the correct numbers, and they do vary a lot from year to year. Again, these are all project driven, right? And so projects that are ongoing are going to continue to receive funds. And so there might be higher and lower amounts, sometimes much higher and much lower, that are funded or requested from year to year. And that's because of the projects themselves. A new building that costs $100 million or more these days. And so, while those projects are going on, there's going to be a lot more funding in those years than other years when there aren't new buildings being requested. So there's a lot of variance in this program, yes.
So the requests are being put forward by the community colleges to the governor's office, and then from there to the General Assembly, or how does that?
Correct. I mean, basically the way it works is we are making a request on behalf of the colleges. So they send the information to us. The projects are prioritized based on a model that MAC developed, so they're involved in the process as well. And so if there's requests that exceed the amount of money in the budget, then that prioritization gives the governor's office the information about how the colleges view which projects should be the priority and so forth. And so we submit the budget formally to DBM on behalf of the colleges, and then the governor's office puts the budget together.
One more question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
The CADE formula, that's only for operations, right? That's not for capital budgets?
That's correct. Jeff can talk about that.
Yeah, that's correct. That's operating funding given to the colleges annually through the CADE program.
But that's not for capital expenses. That's only for.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. And then the last one, sorry, last question. The formulas that we see on the kind of, Howard County Community College 50%, and then Frederick 70% or so. So that's codified in statute?
That's correct. It's in an education article, and it is the it's called the foundation program, which is a calculation that MSDE does for K through 12 schools to figure out the adequate funding level for all of those schools. And each of the jurisdictions, all the counties, they calculate how much those counties have to pay percentage-wise for K through 12 schools. And basically we use the same formula. It's all in statute, education article.
Is there any effort by counties to modify the rates based on I guess I'm just thinking the impact of inflation would vary for Baltimore, DC counties, and as opposed to Frederick or some of the Eastern Shore counties. Has there been any push from them to try to modify those foundational cost sharing, the formula?
I've heard of that from time to time, yes, but we just go by what the current law is.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Schuster and Mr. Newman. I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Dow. We have 3 schools who are submitting stage 1 applications. And Dr. Dow will say a little bit more about this and then introduce Ms. Gordon McCown, who will present. And just for information, we do have representatives from these institutions with us today. They will not be making presentations, but we can certainly ask questions of them, and we'll take each report separately. So Dr. Dow?
Great, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioners. As Commissioner Surkamp just noted, we have three, this is kind of unusual for us at this time to have three pending applications for degree granting, new degree granting institutions established in Maryland. Per our regulations, once we find that the stage 1 application is sufficient, it has gone out for a 30-day public comment period. It is supposed to go before the commission as just a regular agenda item at a commission meeting. And so that is what today's presentations are about. So we have three schools. We have Maple Springs Baptist Bible College and Seminary. We have Maryland College of Osteopathic Medicine, and we have the Meredith School of Osteopathic Medicine. So we're, as Commissioner Surkamp just noted, we're going to go through these one by one. Trish will provide an overview of each of the three schools, and then open it up for any questions, and then move on to the next one. Again, this is just the stage 1 application process. There is a stage 2 application process, which includes a site visit, in-depth review of their academic catalog, and some additional criteria that need to be met. So this is part 1 of a much bigger process to gain approval to operate in Maryland as a degree granting institution. I'm happy to answer any questions about process before I turn the time over to Trish. Are there any questions from the commissioners about this process? I see none. So, Ms. Gordon McCown, she is our Director for Academic Affairs. I turn the time over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine.
Okay, thank you. So as Dr. Dallas stated, our first proposed new institution is Maple Springs Baptist Bible College and Seminary. You can find this report in your commission book on page 11. You'll find the full description there. As a brief overview, Maple Springs Baptist Bible College and Seminary serves Christian-centered adults who want to prepare for local ministry and who seek affordable college education that is available in the evenings and weekends. Maple Springs teaches the Protestant theology and would address the needs of providing open enrollment to students with a non-competitive college admissions process, providing affordable, low-cost tuition for non-traditional students, offering evening and weekend classes, and serving the minority population of Prince George's County. That's a brief overview of Maple Springs. They are proposing a number of certificate programs, associates, a bachelor's, a master's of arts, and divinity, and a doctorate of divinity, doctorate of ministry. So I'll stop right there to see if you have any questions regarding this proposed institution, which has submitted a stage 1 application. Commissioner Coleman?
Yes, Dr. Gordon. You mentioned that this institution will be receiving bachelor's degrees and master's degrees and those type of degrees. Would this also meet the state requirements in terms of GED, the English, the math, whatever?
Yes, the stage 1 application for a degree granting institution is a full-fledged institution. So it would be your traditional college, university requirements would apply here. So they would have to meet the minimum requirements for general education requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And these questions, I'm not sure if you want that to address them to me, or we do have Dr. Marquise Ball. He is the representative from Maple Springs Baptist Bible College. He is the president, and he is available for questions as well.
I have a Commissioner Boyd.
Please, Commissioner Boyd, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question regarding, you mentioned that one of the new degrees that they're offering is a doctorate, is that correct?
That is correct, a Doctor of Ministry.
And do you have information on the nature of the faculty at Maple Lawn?
At Maple Springs, yes,
Maple Spring, yes.
sure. Would you like, Dr. Ball, would you like to answer that question, or?
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for having us here to share. So yes, all of our faculty, particularly in the graduate level, master and doctoral level, are appropriately degreed as far as having the terminal degree in the program that they are leading.
And I will add, Commissioner Boyd, that in stage 2 of the application process, we do an extensive dive into the application, the faculty, the program requirements. So more of that information will be reviewed in stage 2 of the application.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I thought there was one more.
Yeah.
Commissioner Serrano?
Yeah. One quick question. So, if the university or the school, the institution has applied before, does that application get factored into any of the decisions that are being made, or does any aspects of their application come forward? And then the other question I had is, like, if the institution, I guess I'm not sure if I'm like saying this right, but like if the institution is in operation now and it's applying for accreditation, like is that factored in? Is that there's students that are waiting for this school to be accredited now?
Okay, so for your first question regarding, this is a newly submitted stage 1 application that has been deemed sufficient to move forward. So that's where we are with the process. When you say factored in, we do look at each application based on the merits of what's submitted at the time. So we are looking at this application based on what is being presented to us today.
Can I just chime in on that? We are, for those of you on the commissioners that might remember, we did have a previous application from Maple Springs that was deemed incomplete. And so they have since submitted a new application. So we are treating this as a new application that reflects the new state plan, reflects the regulatory requirements. So it's treated as a new application.
Okay, anything else? Any other questions?
So there's nothing of the previous application that's being considered of the, no, okay.
No. And if I can just answer your second question. So Maple Springs currently has approval to operate as a religiously exempt institution. So yes, you're absolutely right. They have current enrollment. It is a consideration that we have. It's not something that is a direct consideration, but we are aware of it. We are sensitive to that and are thoughtful about our processes, knowing that they have current student enrollment under a religious exemption.
So, anything else? And Dr. Dow, thank you for recognizing people. I was trying to recognize them, but I was muted and I didn't realize it. So, all right. Trish, you can go ahead to the second one.
Okay. All right. So I guess before I get started, I will recognize, and I apologize for not doing this the first time. Our second proposed institution is the Maryland College of, sorry, hold on one second. Maryland College of Osteopathic Medicine, also known as MD-COM. And we do have representatives here from that association as well. We have Dr. Barbara Ross Lee. We have Dr. John Seeley. We have Mr. David Moyer and Karen King Sheridan. So we will give them time. If you have questions for them, I will give an overview of their proposed application. I'm so sorry, my screen just flickered. Okay, here we go. So MD-COM is a public-private partnership with the Maryland, with Morgan State University, intended to train high qualified diverse physicians. matching into all specialties to practice in racially and culturally diverse communities. MDCOM is a private institution to be funded initially by investors and will later be tuition supported. MDCOM will be located in a new 4-story building that currently resides on the Morgan State University campus. The vision of the proposed MDCOM is to prepare diverse and underrepresented minority students who, as osteopathic physicians, will contribute their perspectives to the practice of medicine in underserved communities and thereby contribute to diminishing healthcare disparities and enhancing total population health. As the only osteopathic medical school in the state of Maryland and the first established in partnership with HBCUs in the Delaware District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia region, MDCOM proposes they will increase the number of osteopathic physicians practicing in racially and culturally diverse communities. I will preface that statement is a summary of the applicant's proposed institution and their doctorate of osteopathic medicine. So I'll stop right there to see if you have any questions regarding this second newly proposed institution.
Thank you. Any questions? Commissioner Serrano?
Yeah, just a point of clarity. So it's a privately operated entity so it's not taking any funding from the state in terms of operations or capital budgets or anything.
No, they are not. And this is a partnership, meaning their building will be located on the campus of Morgan State University, but it is private.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yeah, so this institution will be the first in the state, but it has a track record of other in other states. Is that what you said?
And I will clarify, they're proposing that they're going to be a newly operating osteopathic medicine school. They do have additional locations, and I will open that up and let them, if they would like to, expound upon their additional operations in other states.
If I can clarify, so they have operated in other states. They are not considered an out-of-state institution operating here in Maryland. We are considering them an in-state institution operating here. So they have other schools, but they are separate and distinct from what they are proposing here in Maryland.
Commissioner Coleman, does that answer your question, or do you want to follow up?
Yeah, I'll just wait to the second stage. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Boyd?
Yes, at this first stage, have they provided you with any information as to the demand, the anticipated demand for the specialty in medicine that they're proposing?
Yeah, so again, in stage 1, they provide a summary of the demand and support need for this program in the state of Maryland. Further review will happen in stage 2, where the team will definitely look further into the demand and tease out how that impacts the state. So stage 1, they have provided general information regarding that and how they're planning to meet that demand.
Any other questions? Commissioner Serrano?
Yeah, so I guess just for like my own little kind of try to make sense of, would this be considered a for-profit institution?
Yes, it is considered a for-profit. But again, they are proposing an in-state, meaning they have physical presence in the state of Maryland.
Okay.
Anything else, Commissioner Serrano, or anybody else? Okay, I think we're good to move on to Meritus.
Okay. Our third and final newly proposed institution is also proposing a doctorate of osteopathic medicine. This institution, Meritus School of Osteopathic Medicine, I'll provide a summary, a brief overview, and then open to questions. Meritus School of Osteopathic Medicine will be a private nonprofit institution to be owned and operated by the Hagerstown-based Meredith Health and funded by the health system. The institution is confident that Meredith Health can provide the necessary financial resources and investment to support the institution during its infancy until MSOM's tuition-supported independent financial stability, which is expected in 2028. Okay, so that's a brief overview of the institution. I will go a little bit further to give you some more context here. They have an expected start date of 2025. MSOM will focus on rural and underserved areas in Western Maryland and other rural areas of Maryland. First and second year students are trained in class and laboratory settings. Third and fourth year students are trained in clinical settings. So the emphasis will be placed on clinical experiences in rural, underserved communities, and MSOM will prioritize rotations across Meredith Health Systems, Washington County, Maryland, and the surrounding region. So I will stop right there and give you an opportunity. This is also found in your commission books on page 15 for a full description of their institution.
And we have some representatives with us.
We do. We have representatives from Meredith, which are Dr. Paula Gregory, David Lear, and President and CEO Malik Joshi.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the commissioners? Okay. Commissioner Coleman.
I'm sorry. Is there a demand for this field? It's just a new field just starting. I think someone kind of asked that in another way.
In their stage 1 application, they have provided detailed information on the need to support the program. There is a significant need throughout the state. They have demonstrated how their program will meet that need, and further review of the market demand will be explored in stage 2 of the application process.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Serrano?
Yeah, just because I think it's because it's based in Hagerstown. I think would the economic impact of the institution or the program would that be factored into the kind of the different processes or the different stages? I see like this institution I think would bring a lot of jobs and have a huge impact in that area. So I'm just curious.
On all of our applications, we do explore the market demand. So there's always a needs-based factor. And part of the application process in stage 1 and stage 2 is to review that need and how the institution plans to meet it. So that is one of the major factors for the application process for all of our institutions.
Anything else? Okay, and again, this is for our information today, and as Dr. Dow explained, these institutions will then move into a stage 2 application, which will involve a more in-depth assessment of their proposals, and so this will be coming back before the commission at some point. Dr. Dow, anything you want to say to wrap up?
No. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you.
So
and thank you, Trish.
I was just going to thank you, Trish, also for taking us through that information. It's very helpful.
Trish, I just have one question.
Go ahead,
In terms of all 3 of these programs, none of them have currently enrolled students already in these programs. Is that correct?
Maple Springs, that's currently authorized as a religious exempt institution, does have students.
Okay.
But the other 2 do not.
Right, that is correct. The other 2 do not.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Has ground been broken for the Morgan State and the Meredith?
I'm sorry, what is that?
Has there been like a groundbreaking ceremony of or not? I mean, not the ceremony, but is the construction already underway for making these institutions in Morgan State?
I can take that one real quick. And I think the quick answer is yes. And maybe we should turn the time over to our two representatives from the two institutions. Is that okay, Trish?
Yes.
So why don't we start with MD Com, Maryland College of Osteopathic Medicine, if you can speak to groundbreaking or any building or construction.
Hi, my name's David Moore. Thank you for, go ahead, Barbara.
No, David, this is in your bailiwick. You go.
The building for the proposed College of Osteopathic Medicine at Morgan State University is going to be built on a location that currently has a building that's being used for their current spring term. So the current plan is to finalize that land lease this month, and then to start the preparations for remediating asbestos in that building going into the fall term, and then breaking ground next year.
Great, thank you. And then a representative from Meredith to speak to building and construction.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Malik Joshi from Meredith Health. We, on our own campus, we have land and we have broken ground to build an academic building of 200,000 square feet, which will take 2 years to build. So that is on our campus, and we've started moving dirt around and should officially kick off in the next couple of months.
Commissioner Serrano, any follow-up to that, or Commissioner Serrano, are you good?
I think, yeah, I was just curious if, like, we asked earlier about if there's any students in the pipeline. I was just like, if there's any construction in the pipeline now. So yeah, that's all I have.
Yeah. Okay, great. Anything else before we move on? Okay, thank you very much for that report. And we have the final item on our agenda is the report on the 2022 Performance Accountability Report that Dr. Schmertz is going to introduce. And this does require our approval. So this is the one action item we have today. So Dr. Schmertz.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Surkamp. Thank you, commissioners. Indeed, I am just going to be introducing Dr. Yu-Shin Lin, Associate Director for Research and Policy Analysis. She has prepared this annual report for you, and as Commissioner Surkamp indicated, it is an action item. And so I will let her go ahead and share a few PowerPoint slides. We have been mindful of keeping the presentation brief and leaving time for questions, but I'll let Dr. Lin talk a bit more about the presentation and get us started.
Thank you, Dr. Schmertz. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, commissioners. Can everyone see my screen slides right now?
Yes, we can see them.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. So I'm here to present 2022 Annual Performance Accountability Report. So before I start to share some of the major findings from this year's Performance Accountability Report, I want to give you some background information about PAR, or Performance Accountability Report. So PAR is an annual important mechanism by which public colleges and universities in Maryland are held accountable. So, so under the current framework, all the public institutions establish and maintain performance standards to meet the institutional and the statewide higher education goals. And they construct a series of key metrics and assess them every year. And they also set a benchmark towards the key metrics, and they evaluate the progress and write annual report and submit it to the commission every year. So because of the different missions and student populations and their structures, so community colleges and the public four-year students are submitting a slightly different metrics to the commission every year. For community colleges, they have the same metrics and slightly different benchmarks according to their different student populations and missions. And those metrics are updated every 5 years. And for public four-year colleges and universities, because their student population, missions, and targets are very different from each other, so they have different metrics. And those metrics, they also use that for budget, for their budgeting process called managing for results. And those metrics are also prepared and submitted to the Department of Budget and Management every year. So, so I will just give you an overview of what I'm going to present to you today. And so in this report, and you can find my summary from your commission book on page 14, and depends on which version you're reading. If you're reading a PDF version, that will be on your page 17. And that is a brief summary of the policy, of the performance accountability report. And so that is a shorter version of the institutional assessment report that was sent along in the email to you last Friday. And so that is a pretty lengthy report with 392 pages. So the first 13 pages are the institutional assessment report, and then the rest of 380 pages are the institution submissions. And so as I just described it, because institutions have different metrics, so in the key indicators, I'm going to present a few indicators that they share in common. So I'm going to show you how did the enrollment, retention, and completion outcomes change during the pandemic. And then I will show you the institutional assessment, that is to answer questions, are the institutions on track to meet their established benchmarks? And this year, because pandemic still impact the institutions and the students in significant ways, so there has been a general concern about the unequal impacts on students, especially for those from underrepresented and historically disadvantaged backgrounds. So this year, performance accountability report focuses on the equity issues. So I'm going to show you these key indicators and institutional assessment by using an equity lens. And every year, institutions will receive the MHAC prompts. So those are some questions for institutions to respond. So like last year, we asked the institution, like, what are the biggest challenges you have during the COVID? And this year, because we focus on equity, the two questions are actually from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. So those questions are, what are the barriers for institutions to achieve the goals equitably for all students? And then second, how do they identify and address the inequities specifically? So first of all, I'm going to show you the summary of the key indicators. So just a note about these key indicators. So the PAR 2022 is a measurement or performance evaluation for institutions' performance of the academic year 2021 to 2022. But because there is a lack of the data collection, so most of the data, most of the recent available data is actually academic year 2020 to 2021. So that is actually the year under the most significant impact of the COVID-19. So without further ado, so first indicator I'm going to show you is undergraduate full enrollment. So as you may already learn from last year's opening full enrollment, so from fall 2020 to 2020, fall 2021, so the total undergraduate enrollment decreased from 248,000 to 233,000, with a 6% decrease. And this large decrease was majorly contributed by community colleges. They have experienced a 10% decrease in their undergraduate full enrollment from 2020 to 2021. And the positive finding is, even though we have a large reduction in enrollment, but the proportion of the race and ethnicity in student enrollment is stable. So as you can tell, the proportion of Black and Hispanic and Asian students are keeping stable from 2020 to 2021, with a slight decrease for the white students from 2020 to 2021. And then we're just going to look at the graduation or success measures for the public four-year institutions. For public four-year institutions, we're going to present the 6-year graduation rate. So it's very important to notice that we have to compare students on the same level. So that is to see, for this metrics, we're not going to present the student outcome year by year, but by student cohort. That is the year when students firstly entered college. In that case, we can make sure we have the 6 years to track for student outcomes for all of the students in the public four-year university. So in that case, we're going to compare the student outcomes for the cohort 2015 to 2014. And then, as you can tell, So those lines represent different races. And then this green dotted line represents the average level. So as you can, there are two important takeaways from this 6-year graduation rate by race and ethnicity. First of all, there is still big racial gaps between Black and white students and Hispanic and white students. They are well below the state level, average level in the 6-year graduation rate. And also this racial gap increased a little under the COVID-19 pandemic. African American students' 6-year graduation rate decreased by 2.7 percentage points, which is larger than other race categories and is larger than state level. And then for the community colleges, we track them by 3-year graduation and transfer rate. That is to measure how many students graduate or transferred or graduated and transferred within 3 years. And I'm also going to show you by race and ethnicity. So similarly, Black and Hispanic students are below the state average. And also African American students enrollment graduation and transfer rate declined largely than the other race categories from 2017 cohort to 2018 cohort. And then next will be institutional assessment. So how institutions actually respond to this measurement, this metrics, and how do they extend, and some interventions they were making to improve their performance. And I will just summarize some of the key performance measures which are on track or not on track. So for public 4-year community colleges and universities, so their enrollment decline was majorly contributed by 3 factors. First of all, there are few recent high school graduates entering college immediately after they graduate from high school. So from the report of Maryland Longitudinal Data Center, they actually reported this number, the proportion of immediate college enrollment for recent high school graduates was about 50%. So that is to say at least 50% of the recent high school graduates enter college immediately after they graduate. But this proportion was dropped below 50% in the pandemic. So recently there were about only 47% of the recent high school graduates immediately enter college after they graduate from high school. And then, so the second reason they summarized is there are fewer transfer students transfer from community college to 4 years. So that is also the important resources of their undergraduate students every year. And second reason is because of the international travel ban, there are fewer and fewer international students during the pandemic coming to study abroad. So talking about public 4-year colleges and universities, so I'm going to summarize some of the key performance that are on track and not on track. So for the on track performance that include minority enrollment, so despite the largest decline institution experienced in 2020 to 2022, so the proportion of minority enrollment stayed stable. For the measurements that are not on track, that include retention and graduation, as you can tell from the previous slide. So minority students actually experienced the largest decline in the graduation rate during pandemic. And then for community colleges, they also experienced enrollment decline, and this is actually a continuation of the long-term trend that trace back to 10 years ago. So very important takeaway from community college enrollment decline is those declines were observed in all enrollment types, including credit and non-credit enrollment, full-time and part-time enrollment. So it is important. So one reason for community college enrollment, decreasing community college enrollment is community college enrollment is counter-cyclical. That meaning if economy is going up, so a community college enrollment is usually going down. So so that is a partial reason why we observe the 10 years continuous continuity in community enrollment, community college enrollment decline over 10 years. And another important reason that also can be contributed to the COVID-19 pandemic is the largest decline was observed in non-credit programs. So that is because the non-credit programs are usually instructed or taught in person. So it's really inflexible for them to change from the in-person classes to the online version classes. And also there is another very important portion of the enrollment in community college, that is high school dual enrollment. So mostly this high school dual enrollment was instructed in high schools, and because of COVID, so many of those classes were canceled and could not be taught in person, and those classes are also very inflexible in modalities. So that is some reasons community colleges summarize in their report about why they experienced large enrollment declines in the last year. And to summarize some of the performance measures, community colleges reported on track and not on track of the last year. So for community colleges, minority enrollment, tuition and fees, and developmental education are those metrics are on track. And their enrollment and the full-to-full retention and transfer are the performance measures are not on track. And finally, so I will quickly summarize the responses, institutions' responses to Maryland, to MHAC's prompts. So you can find the detailed prompts in either institution submissions or in the institutional assessment report attached in that full PAR report. Send it along in the email. So the first prompt is, what is the biggest challenges the institution faces as it attempts to equitably meet the goals, objectives, and performance measures in the state plan? So the biggest three challenges mentioned by the institutions are, first, the enrollment declines is the biggest concern for institutions to worry, and they especially worry about the impact of enrollment declines on minority students, and also because of the enrollment declines that cause some uncertain financial resources that institutions are worried about. And for community colleges, they also worry about how to identify the barriers that impact students from succeeding. And the second prompt MHAC given to the institution's answer is to ask whether or not the institution use disaggregated data to identify equity issues in student educational opportunities and outcomes. If so, how has this disaggregated data provided insights into the institution educational equities and inequities? So almost all institutions use this disaggregated data to answer equity questions. So those data were disaggregated by race, gender, socioeconomic status, and other demographic or financial characteristics. And for community colleges, so degree progress analysis is important tool for them to discover inequities in student success, and degree progress analysis is actually a part of the report submitted as a part of their PAR. And then for the institution who said they could not use the disaggregated data to answer equity questions, the reason they for that is their minority enrollments are so small, and they could not track those small number of students and deliver some meaningful comparable outcomes for the minority students. So as an alternative, they use Compass Climate Survey to track student success and track the inequity and equity issues. And also those data were presented in different ways, like dashboard or in different report and to different entities. And in conclusion, so in this year's report, we find some ripple effects on the enrollment, retention, and transfer and graduation during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we find disproportionately larger effects for minority students in some measures. But looking forward, there are some positive findings. So as you learned from Dr. Schmer's presentation on the 2022 opening full enrollment, so actually in the 2022 opening full enrollment suggests that first-time full-time enrollments recovered statewide by 4%, with 10 community colleges and 9 public four-year institutions reporting increases in first-time full-time enrollment. So there are some spots. There are some bright spots observed in the report, and then despite the high inflation rate we observed last year, the tuition and fees still remain stable in fall 2022 in all public institutions, and institutions are still making progress towards their degree goals and contribute to Maryland's degree attainment goal, that is at least 55% of Marylanders has an associate degree by 2025. So finally, its recommendation. So it is recommended that Commission approve the 2022 Performance Accountability Report for submission to the Governor and General Assembly as required by law. So that concludes my presentation. I am happy to answer any questions if you have. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Lin. So let's open things up for questions. Does anybody have anything? So I would ask one question. You know, I think we all know that institutions are concerned about and work to close that gap between performance, or the gap in performance between different racial groups. Is there anything that stands out that the institutions identified that seems to be helping them close that gap?
Yeah, sure. One thing I read from their report is, so of course data really helps them, because the first thing is to identify who are the groups that suffers most during the pandemic. So at least one institution mentioned by this disaggregate data, they could find out actually the Black male students are suffered most during the pandemic, and they could just more accurately target on the right population to help them out. And also they find out most of the institutions mentioned that financial aid is really important for the minority students to solve their barriers and other things that stop them from succeeding. And so that is also one of their concerns mentioned in the report, because of COVID-19 and declined enrollment. So they are not sure if they can continue provide this financial aid for the minority student or student from underserved backgrounds. And the third thing they mentioned in the report is definitely professional advisor is really helpful, because there are definitely a lot of issues cannot be solved in campus. And so, so basically those students do not have necessary connections to the community or college education community. So for most of the cases, they have to really have the right people to let them feel involved and connected with community, and also give them enough information and to be able to succeed in their study. So that is some of the either the findings or interventions they mentioned during their report.
Thanks, Dr. Ligon. Commissioner Coleman. I think you're muted.
Okay, thank you. I'm always concerned, is there an office outside of the individual campus where they go in to study institutions, especially community colleges, and see some of their weak points? I know that each college write their own mission statement, but to actually go in and see their good points and weak points and kind of advise them, I think your institution will work better doing this or doing that. I think most colleges, especially community college, they concentrate on preparing students for the next, their four-year institution. But I think we need more. I don't know what it's called now. Trade schools. That students will not have to go through such a rigid academic program, but will do well with maybe auto mechanics, these other refrigeration, things of that nature to help them prepare for a better quality of life than just drop out because they're not doing well academically. So my question is there an office on the state level or some other level that can go into a college and advise them, maybe you should do this or try this, if they had the money?
Okay, okay, so Emily, I will just leave that question for you to answer.
Dr. Dow.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Coleman. Thank you, Dr. Lim, for the great presentation. I do think campuses are doing that work on their own. We see from the academic approval side of things that they are very strategic in the programs that they put forward, both on the credit side as well as the non-credit side. So the programs that you just mentioned, auto mechanic, HVAC, While we do have some, particularly community colleges, that offer associate's degrees in those training, as you can probably imagine, much of that training is over on the non-credit side. So they certainly work with local employers. The campuses work with advisory councils that are in collaboration with chambers of commerce and other relevant entities to ensure that they're providing programming that meets the diversity of students' interests, but also ensures that students will have employment when they complete their program. I think the challenge is advising students about all of these variety of options that are available to them. Right. I think it's also a bit of a culture shift as well, that, you know, we have lived in an era where the college degree is the thing to do, but study after study after study suggests that that's not the only thing. Right. And students can be very successful economically, financially, professionally in non-degree granting programs, depending on their career interests and what the industry requires, right? To be an HVAC mechanic, you don't need an associate's degree. You need to know how to run an air conditioning machine and fix it. So I think it's a mix between industry needs. It's a mix between ensuring that students are well advised on the diversity of options out there for them. So it's a little bit of a complicated issue, but I think to get back to your question, is there a way to advise campuses? I think campuses do that already, based on, and not just the community colleges, the 4 years do this too, based on advisory councils and a variety of other stakeholders that are industry leaders to talk about what kind of programs to put in place.
Commissioner Cohen, does that answer your question, or do you have another?
No, that answered my question, but I just wish that, yes, that answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Davis?
Yes, ma'am. Happy New Year, everyone. Just a quick question. Did any of the findings come back to state where the students might be going outside of them leaving the institutions, other than financial reasons or advisory issues? Like, are they just going into the workforce because of those said problems? Or are they just, you know, quitting and going to other universities or other community colleges elsewhere because Maryland can't fit their programming needs?
So that is a great question. So from MPAC data collection, we can only answer the question like the students move within the system, that is within the Maryland higher education. So that actually limits to public institutions and independent private institutions. So if students truly leave this system and going somewhere else, like going to the labor market or going to another state, so that is something like out of the scope of our data collection. So for that, we could not answer the question why students quit this system or why students want to pursue something else outside the system. And so I don't know if Barbara wants to chime in this question.
Dr. Schmertz?
Thank you. It's a great question. I think to complement Dr. Lin's response, it sounds like you're also wondering whether the institutions themselves can identify that. And the answer, depending on the institution, is to some extent yes, in that institutions implement a number of things when individuals leave their campus. They attempt to survey them. That, you can well imagine, it can be very difficult for an institution to do, to get students to respond to questionnaires about why they departed. But they definitely have an ability to gather that data, however representative it is, right? We've all answered surveys. We've all done Amazon reviews. You know, they can follow along a continuum, but that is still a method by which institutions try to learn what it is that might be driving students to depart. So there is a information loop that they try to fulfill. There's also something that the institutions can tap into, which doesn't necessarily get to the qualitative answer, but can give some sense of the quantitative answer, which is this entity called the National Student Data Clearinghouse, or National Data Student Clearinghouse. Either way, it is, as it sounds, it is an entity sort of institutions buy into, but it is a collection of data that institutions from around the country participate in, and then you as your own institution can query through that system for fee answers to where your students may go to round out your own data and to be able to tell a more richer story of your student's path, right? So maybe there's a subset of students that you put into the file, and you find, as you surmised, that a subset of them do actually end up attending and possibly graduating from an institution in another state, a border state, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Virginia. And so that's another thing that institutions can learn and inform their own work. But as Dr. Lin said, neither of those are methods we use.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Serrano?
Okay. Yeah, a couple of questions. So like one on the metrics themselves. The metrics that we're using, are there kind of Department of Education, like in terms of obviously the race and ethnicity parts questions, and then the other ones in terms of enrollment, is there any disparity in terms of what the Department of Education uses and what the state of Maryland uses, or like any regional accreditation bodies? Is there any, are we satisfied to say that these numbers actually are a good indicator of what the numbers or the measurements or the metrics that are being used across in other institutions across the country?
Okay, so if I'm understanding your question correctly, you're asking Commissioner Stern, you're asking whether or not those measures are good enough for institutions to use to track their performance annually, or you're asking about the minority, like how the data, how the outcomes were disaggregated by different races or different ages or other things.
So I can give you an example. So like Latino, sometimes like if it's a Latino who is like Dominican and who would be Black, they might check Black for race and they might check Latino for ethnicity. They are counted in some institutions, or I think in the Department of Education, they're counted as Latino. They're not counted as Black. So in that case, that metric, you know, maybe other institutions might count them as a Black student and they might count them as a Latino student as well. So are we okay in terms of the racial question? But the other question is in terms of the metrics of like enrollment. So if it's cut off at, you know, say for community college, it's cut off at 3 years, or it's cut off at 4 years. Did they complete a 2-year degree in those 4 years, or did they complete the, you know, I don't know, undergraduate in 8 years, 6 years? Are the metrics that we're using here in this state, are they transferable, or are they kind of the same basically as what we see in the Department of Education or other institutions?
Yes. Yeah, so basically those those are race ethnicity categories. We follow the standards of the state of education, and so there is a federal data what we call that agency or a department called APAT. So it's a federal level data collection that each institution submits their data and to report their enrollment and faculty and other student success measures to the federal every year. So basically, so for MHAC, our data collection, our race and ethnicity definition strictly follow that guideline. So basically for Hispanic, so basically that is a student who solely identify themselves as Hispanic. And we also have, so that is not shown in this chart because there are so few number of them. So for students who identify them as they have the race more than 2 races, then those students will be categorized as other race category. So in that case, because the small sample size, so we could not show their performance or like outcomes here because there are just so few number of them out there. So, but so to answer your question, in our office we did not really test whether or not those race or ethnicity categories or definitions are good enough, because so this is actually the decision made by the federal government, and we just follow their standards. But we do have some like a detailed different race categories. We internally sometimes will track them, like if we have enough data, we sometimes will track other race categories, because those categories actually include more students who are actually not identified by some like traditional race category. So that includes students whose race is unknown and who has more than one 2 races. more than one resist. Sorry about that. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah. So then the other question, I guess, I don't know how to word the question, but I'm going to say it like, when I look at the disparities and the growing disparity between Latino and Black, it doesn't feel right. It sets a, and I feel like I'm just looking on the website and I see the different tabs for 2018 and 2017, and you see this kind of like, and it feels like it's almost like we're expecting like the population to get worse. And I just feel like maybe it's like a cry to be a little bit more alarmist, but is there a way that we can do a separate report that kind of really just says we're at a really serious situation here where we see Blacks and Latinos getting worse than we have before? And I think that's for me, because I just don't want this report to be passed on and say, well, we do it every year, this is what we got to do. And it just, for me, it worries me, because it's like, again, like the business as usual, we're just going to get the same, and it's getting worse. So I don't want the same. So I don't know if maybe it's beyond the scope of what we can do as a commission, but I just feel like if there's a separate report that we could possibly do to just say, hey, let's like hit the panic button and say, let's really, the governor's office, General Assembly, let's really get on board with this.
Yeah, totally understandable, because that is why this year in this report, we actually add this equity lens to all of our assessment report, and also in our new state plan, we also add the equity lens in all of our action items. And also, of course, this performance accountability report is help institutions to identify their issues and the problems through this data reporting system. And the only things can be done when they identify the issues from this annual report system. And then, like, there are definitely other interventions the agency was tried on, like we have the diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, and we have this cultural diversity report that was submitted also annually. So that is also like try to solve these issues, like to try to call institutions' attention on these equity issues. So the purpose of this report is to ask institutions to evaluate themselves in terms of all of these important measures. And then next step is we ask institutions to answer a question like, how do you solve these problems? And of course, we do not hope institutions to just submit the report and say, hey, I finished everything and I'm not going to do anything about that. So so this is the first step, and we definitely look forward for there are more interventions coming out next. Yeah, I don't know if you want add something more.
Commissioner Serrano, you raise a really important question and something that needs to be addressed. And I think as we have conversations with the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee, that we can really have some substantive conversation around that. There are institutions who have figured out how to close the gap, and it's part of why I asked my first question. Is that if we could identify some of those best practices and help other institutions figure out how to implement them. And some of the institutions that have been successful in closing the gap tend to be smaller, where they can provide a great deal more individual attention to students. But there are also, lots of factors operating, in the populations, where we see the disparity. There are a lot of first-generation students, so not a lot of knowledge, even with the families, about expectations in college and how to manage that, socioeconomic reasons. So it's a really complex issue, and it's worth us spending some time talking about. Dr. Dow, did you have something?
Absolutely. I just wanted to share with the commissioners, this would be an excellent opportunity. Barbara, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're gearing up to send out the prompt for this next year for this report. And we can certainly tailor the prompt. Again, as Yushin noted, our prompts this year were just about, are you measuring inequities? And if you are, how are you addressing it? And some of the campuses actually didn't really quite answer that first question. Are you measuring inequities? That was a bit of a, but the point is, we would welcome commissioner input on the prompt that we give for this next cycle. And Commissioner Serrano, if you're suggesting we focus on Black and Hispanic student populations and hone in on that as a more specific challenge, we are certainly open to that. And I think as commissioners, you have every opportunity to, in the next year, really put pressure or get more information on how campuses are doing that. So just wanted to open that up as an opportunity.
And when do you send that request out?
Barbara, are you able to provide the details on that?
For the performance accountability report, the guidelines typically go out later in the spring. If we wanted to be a part, weave those kinds of questions into other required reports like cultural diversity report, that those guidelines are going to go out in the next, well, ideally as soon as we know who will have taken Secretary Fielder's place, because that's under the Secretary's signature, but that's going to go out in the next 2 weeks. And then there's other reports. So basically the short answer is from now till, we'll say, roughly late March or April, we would have room to get feedback from commissioners as to things they want us to focus reporting prompts on.
Now, I don't know what else is pressing for the February meeting, but Dr. Dow, you and I could have some conversation as we think about building that agenda, and this may be an opportunity, not opportunity, but the right time to schedule the DEI more in-depth reporting, and then a larger conversation around this issue and how we might suggest some things where you can gather some data from institutions. But not only what are they doing, but other, we're talking public institutions here. I think some of the private institutions have had some real successes. But, can we, get some idea of what some of those successful initiatives are? Commissioner Coleman, did you have your hand up?
No, I'll wait till later. I was just, the last question that that was raised, I feel the same way. And what I'm thinking that maybe the institutions that own these lower ed, maybe they just expect the same thing over and over again. That's what I was asking about, someone to go into these institutions to have them to look more serious about their data and what they're doing, and what they make suggestions of what they should be doing.
Right.
Not sure whether that's our responsibility or not.
Yeah. And Commissioner Strana, did you have something else?
Yeah, just as so many years ago, I worked, the UN Development Program does this human development report, and it has a bunch of indicators and metrics, and they compile all the data and they kind of put it out there and say, this is the human development index, and here's the human development report, and we do it every year, and then we put it out there. As things started moving along, they started putting together these kind of focus on, like every year they would do a focus on something, right? A focus on health systems, a focus on democracy, or a focus on women and children, or something, just to try to raise the attention, the spotlight on that particular issue, because of the fact that just a simple report with numbers and data just got glossed over, right? I guess maybe my hope is that not with this report, but maybe a separate report, a special report, a focus on this, at least goes to a university administrator and say, hey, this is a serious issue. This is not just a business as usual thing. There's something the commission is very, very focused on this issue, and you guys need to take it a little bit more seriously. And then from there, the little stories, right? The stories of here's how this college or this university had this challenge, and here's how they overcame it. I think it would be a little bit helpful to have that. But again, that's putting on more work, the commission. But again, that's just my concern. So.
Okay, thank you. So again, hold all those thoughts, and when we get this on the agenda, we can have a fuller conversation around this and consider what kind of recommendations that we might want to make, not only for staff but for ourselves as commissioners, in terms of what are the things that we want to hold people accountable for. So, okay, could we go back to the last slide so that we can see the formal motion, and I can ask someone to second that. So.
Sure. Let me reshare my screen.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, here is
So-
the recommendation.
So there's the recommendation that the commission approve the 2022 Performance Accountability Report for submission to the Governor and General Assembly as required by law. Could I have somebody introduce that as a motion? Commissioner Coleman, thank you. And a second, Commissioner Serrano. And before I ask your vote, is there any further conversation on this? Okay, all in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
And anyone opposed? And any abstentions? And I'm sorry, Commissioner Boyd, did you want to ask a question before we took that vote?
No. As the previous discussion that we just ended is certainly a critical issue that we need to figure out a way to go back and concentrate on. So I'm just in support of where the thinking is at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I know Dr. Dow will help me keep that in the forefront. Okay, so the motion passed. And so that concludes this part of our meeting. And at this point, well, let me, before I ask for a motion for a closed session, does anybody have anything else to raise that wasn't on the agenda? Okay, so with that, I would like to move us into our closed session so that we can discuss a personnel issue and to obtain legal advice under General Provisions 3-305B1 and B5. And so I will introduce that as a motion and would appreciate a second.
Commissioner Boyd, I second.
Thank you. And we have to do this as a roll call, Soma, am I right? So this, we have to actually record everyone. So let me just go through my list, and if I miss anybody who is present that I don't have listed as present. Commissioner Boyd?
Present.
Are you? Aye, okay. Commissioner Coleman?
Yes.
And Commissioner Howe, are you still with us? Oh, there you are. Yes, there. Commissioner Salinger?
Yes.
Commissioner Serrano?
Present.
Commission, or you're in favor of it, right? Moving into closed session.
Oh, yeah.
That's okay. Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
And Commissioner Davis?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm a yes. So I think that's everybody. Did I miss anyone?
I think Sade.
I'm sorry.
Sade?
No, she got me.
Oh, she got you. Okay.
Yep.
Sorry.
Okay, all right. So that motion carries, and so what we need to do is to leave this meeting, and we will send a separate link for the closed session. So if you'll go to that link and join all of us. Staff, thank you for all of your work and helping us in the discussions today. And I will see everybody in a few minutes on the new link that was sent to you. Okay? All right. And so if we can end this session.